Now we're going to hear from Dr. Jose Ramos. He's a researcher of and advocate for commons-based social change. He's focused on supporting anticipatory design and social innovation through his practice, Action Foresight, and through a number of other high-impact projects. He is Senior Consulting Editor of the Journal for Future Studies and writes on cultural, political and economic issues. And he's also highly involved with the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, which is an organisation I personally take a lot of inspiration from. So it's a real pleasure to have him here today. Please welcome him.
All right, thanks for that. So hopefully you all discovered that you're a producer and maker of at least one thing, and probably multiple things. So what I'm going to be talking about is what's happening today in terms of how we're mutualizing knowledge and design in a number of areas to really address the big social justice and sustainability challenges that we're facing. The talk is called Cosmolocalization and the Emergence of Homo Mutualis. First, I'm going to talk about three movements of the Anthropocene, and I'm sure you've heard about this idea, the Anthropocene. It's a little bit of a pompous idea, where human beings suddenly appear on the planet and have such a big impact that we name an entire geological era after ourselves. But there is an important point to this. So the significance of humans as a species with planetary impacts, and it's a popular definition of the Anthropocene. Humanity has become such a powerful aggregate force, we can assign a geological era to ourselves. I'd like to talk about two more movements of the Anthropocene. The second one is an awareness of ourselves as a planetary species with planetary impacts. We're not just blindly having planetary impacts. Well, some part of the population is. We are increasingly aware of our powerful and precarious effects. So if we were only the first movement of the Anthropocene, then we were no different than the bacteria that created the first extinction event 4 billion years ago or 3 billion years ago. Right? So we're not just this aggregate force that creates an impact. We also have this reflective, emerging planetary awareness. And then this third movement is reflective planetary responses. It's the movement from awareness to action. Signifies the capacity for humanity to leverage the second aspect, reflective planetary awareness, toward coordinated, intelligent responses to the challenges that we collectively face. And that is what is happening now. And it's what Paul Hawken called, in his book, Blessed Unrest, humanity's autoimmune response. So for the crises that we encounter, we have almost like a planetary autoimmune response, where we have millions of people now responding to these various challenges. So in a nutshell, this is what we're looking at. I love action research. I love action learning. So this is a planetary action learning cycle. Welcome to the planetary action learning cycle. Okay, so what does this mean in terms of what it means to be a human being? So, we also named, we make a lot of pompous terms for ourselves, don't we? So, the Anthropocene, a whole geological era for ourselves, but also Homo sapien, wise human being, right? Now, we're probably questioning that in this time. But what does this mean? A species that invented the use of fire. Pre-industrial person was resourceful. We had to mostly use local materials. We're good at our hands, crafting things that we need. And we're involved in creative activities. And this came with making of tools and language and all the other things that anthropologists essentially have discovered. Now, this is what we have become. Homo Consumerist. emerge as a species that has largely lost its ability to make things for itself. It gets fleeting pleasure from the next purchase, but is largely alienated from the context of the object, where it came from and where it's going. Does not factor. I recently, my cousin took my 4-year-old daughter to go buy something at Kohl's, and they were handing out free little toys for kids, and my daughter was so excited. You know, look what I got from Kohl's, and she wanted me to open it up. And I opened it up, and it was this micro little bottle of Dettol, right? So they're marketing Dettol to my 4-year-old. Not only that, it's a choking hazard. Anyways, I'll sue them later. I'm a Californian. So Homo Consumerists, we've atrophied our core abilities to produce. And this is what we are regaining through the maker movement, Fab Labs, and it's always been there. You know, it's always been there with us. So Homo Mutualis is a recognition that each of us is part of something greater, a commons, a rediscovered creative power supported by communities of contributors, designers, and makers who mutualize resources and value for community across scales, local, thematic, global. And we treat what gets used as sacred, honoring the great life cycle and where it goes, Earth, as sacred. So this is the proposed sort of evolutionary trajectory. And I think there are 3 key things that underpin this. So first is a sense of interdependence with something greater than ourselves. And that we're concretely realizing with climate change. The atmosphere has become our collective commons. And so we need to work in alignment with that. The second one is the creative potential in every human being. That every human being has creative potential. And that no matter who that person is, there's something that person can produce within a community that is of value. And the sacredness of all dimensions of life. So I think these are the 3 things that underpin this emergence of Homo Mutualis. So that was the exercise we just did. We'll just move past that. So what does mutualization mean for our planetary era? You've probably seen pictures like this. And this is from, the 19th century, even probably the early 20th century, where people in towns all work together to build each other's infrastructure, because that's the logical way to do it. So the real planetary context for the 21st century has a number of elements. And I draw heavily on the work of Michelle Bowens and others in the Peer-to-Peer Foundation for this. So first, it's the emergence of a digital commons where accessing knowledge can have 0 marginal cost. What that means is that we have immaterial abundance. It doesn't cost me a lot to get on the internet, and I can go find lots of stuff on the internet. It's there. It's there for me. But we have a heavy human ecological footprint, and we are beyond planetary boundaries. We're using, about an Earth and a half's resources per year. We're in ecological deficit and borrowing from future generations. And, Australia experiences relative poverty. There are parts of the world that have really, severe poverty. And the need for people to produce the things that they need and to empower people with the right to redesign, to reproduce, to repair. We have an extractive political economy that drives perverse incentives and social and ecological externalities. And we have urbanization and the rise of the city. And the city is a new force and new potential. So within this context, I'd like to propose this idea called Cosmolocalization. I tried to make it unpronounceable so that it couldn't be appropriated, basically. And so far it's working. Yeah. So what's the Cosmo? The Cosmo is the universal human rights and ethics and the right to the human legacy of designs, a global design commons, that every human being should have the right to the legacy of human creativity that potentiates people in any part of the world to produce the things that they need and to solve their sustainability challenges. We need planetary governance for the protection of planetary commons and the production of goods and services within planetary boundaries. The localization is building cooperative enterprises, circular economies, localized production, community orientation, urban and regional mutualization of labor, resources, and value. And it's an embrace of technology. This is an image from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's one of my favorite images in cinematic history. And it's where the proto-human, the ape, throws the bone into the air, and then the bone turns into a space station and starts floating, through space. I love that image because, for me, it says humans were technological from our evolutionary origins. So it's not about de-technologizing ourselves, but really it's about embracing who we are as technological beings, but in the most ecologically wise possible way. So Cosmolocalization describes the process of bringing together our globally distributed knowledge and design commons with the high to low-tech capacity for localized production. It is based on the ethical premise, drawing from cosmopolitanism, that people and communities should be universally empowered with the heritage of human ingenuity that allowed them, us, to more effectively create livelihoods and solve problems in our local environments. And that, reciprocally, local production and innovation should support the well-being of our planetary commons. So this is a kind of model of the way I see Cosmolocalization working, and I'll give a couple of examples in a second. But at a global scale, we're pulling open, globally distributed design. We're creating platforms for those. And at a local level, producer communities are involved in peer production of value. When people at a local level produce value, it can be pulled for the use for anyone around the world, and then it can be recirculated. So it's a virtuous cycle. So here are just a couple of examples that I've picked up. There's more than I can keep up with. There's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, and I can't keep up with the documentation, to be honest. So this is FarmBot. They essentially turned a CNC machine into a farming robot. It's very clever. And you can program it, and it will do all of your farming for the next, month. It'll even weed the thing. My wife would say, she's a hardcore permaculturalist, would say the joy of farming should be getting your fingers dirty. But, what if you're a yuppie and you're busy? Come on, right? and you want to grow your own food. But these people are brilliant, and they're open. That machine is open source. It's an open source machine. You can hack the thing. It's amazing. Okay, WikiHouse, open source house fabrication outfit. In the UK, they're also in New Zealand, and I don't know if they're in Australia. But again, open source. They're producing these modular systems that lock together, kind of those kind of traditional Japanese houses that allow you to just take the design and build it where you want to build it. Precious Plastic is developed container-sized plastic recycling facilities that you can just go, I want one of those. You get the machines. You can take plastic and repurpose the plastic. And that's kind of like just a view of some of the instruments that come with the whole thing. Open Motors used to be open something. Anyways, Open Motors, open source cars. And that's been done before. Tesla, Elon Musk made the decision to make, I don't know how much of Tesla cars are open source. The Rocky Mountain Institute did that about a decade ago with electric vehicles. So there's lots of resources out there for this. FarmHack is a collective in the northeastern United States, and they essentially prototype, document, and build farm equipment for each other, and they make it totally open source for any community to use, any farmer to use around the world. And there they are testing one of their instruments. AbilityMate is an outfit in Sydney, and they 3D print prosthetics for people with cerebral palsy. And so they're essentially, sort of cultivating a ecosystem of 3D print, designers who develop 3D printing. And the whole, it's actually quite complex what they're doing. It would take a while to go into it, but kind of collaborations with universities that are doing the prosthetic science, collaborating with designers that are going to be producing the 3D printed prosthetics, and a number of other parts of that ecosystem. OpenRove in Berkeley, California produce underwater exploration drones. And they're a kind of hybrid model. About half of their stuff is open source. The other half is the secret sauce. They've got angel investors, and for them it's kind of a complex thing to just go, it's all just going to be free. So there's different models here. Each one of these is kind of a slightly different model. And that's my son playing with one of their machines. And that's one of the founders, Eric, and he's just a really awesome guy. He's a really cool guy. Okay, so what's happening is stigmergy. This is a term that has been used in biological sciences to describe the behavior of ants. When they leave pheromone traces, they add a contribution, and then another ant comes in behind and also adds something. So I don't like the idea of being a bee, an ant, because you got a queen bee and she bosses you around and tells you what to do. But it's a metaphor, and the metaphor is essentially saying that we are emerging into a global contributory system, a contributory system that includes the entire planet that we're in. So we've already seen this. For example, Wikipedia. I can put a page up, and it can be really written in a really crappy way, but someone's going to come in, they're going to add a picture, and then someone else is going to come in, and they're going to do a little bit of an edit, and someone else is going to do something different. So we're in this era of stigmergy, the mutualization of design, knowledge, strategy at a global level, and increasingly at a coordinated level. One of my favorite Cosmo-local projects was one called Hack the Water Crisis, run by Stop, Reset, Go. And this is a picture of Gian James Wong. And also Andy Thompson was part of this. He's another driver of Stop, Reset, Go. So where are you, Andy? So if you want to talk about, if you want to find out about Stop, Reset, Go, talk to Andy. But this is a great example because Cape Town was facing this massive, massive water crisis. And so Stop, Reset, Go basically said, we want a global hackathon so that we get designers from around the world and locally to begin to look at how do we solve our water crisis. If we solve our water crisis here, then we also solve your water crisis because all the knowledge is open and then contributes to. When Perth has a water crisis, they've already got the legacy of all the other hackathons that have happened around the world. So we're building this global, contributory, asynchronous system of problem solving. So the way that Michelle Bowens talks about this is Cosmolocalization is a new paradigm for the production and distribution of value that combines the universal sharing of knowledge, Cosmo, with the subsidiarity of production as close as possible to the place of need, local, essentially through distributed local manufacturing and voluntary mutualization. The general idea is not to impede technological progress through intellectual property. In an era of climate change where we cannot afford the 20-year lag in innovation due to patents, and to radically diminish the physical cost of transport through local production. Cosmolocalization is based on the belief that the mutualization of provisioning systems can radically diminish the human footprint on natural resources, which need to be preserved for future generations and all beings on the planet. So just to conclude, I think I got about 3 or 4 more minutes. I'm just going to sort of outline some of the areas of work and challenge and some of those stepping stones. So first of all, there's lots of initiatives, and if you want to find out about them, you can go to the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, and there's other places. There's also Fab City, the Fab City initiative that Thomas Diaz initiated. But here are some basic ideas. So first of all, one of the big challenges is value bleed. This is one of the topics that Michelle Bawens has kind of led, and it's a really important one. So his basic argument is that in the open source movement, most of that quote-unquote open knowledge has been essentially used within the corporate sector. So Linux is now big business for IBM and Sun Microsystems and all the other ones, right? And it's based on the back of voluntary contributions, an open source contributory system. So if we're going to be able to build a new economy and the cooperative sector, we need to be able to circulate that value back into the cooperative sector. So he's put forward the idea of a peer-to-peer license, like Creative Commons, but a mechanism for mutualization, so that if I use a design, right, and I'm part of a co-op, it's okay. But if I'm part of a big company, maybe I pay a royalty. So I met one guy in Mexico City when I gave a talk there. His name was Oscar Vasquez. And his solution was that when someone goes to the CNC machine to get the furniture actually cut, they actually pay right there at the CNC machine, and the royalty goes to the designer. It goes straight to the designer. So there's different models. It hasn't been worked out. And so my question is there a role for, I don't know the answer to this, is there a role for holochain or blockchain to develop or form the ecosystem between cooperative enterprises that are using this global contributory system? The other issue is bending the state. So there's another peer-to-peer foundation idea, which is that we actually need partner state and partner city models. This means that the city and the state plays an enabling role for this shift to happen. And so the question is, how do we actually begin to work with a new framework where the state is not, it's going to begin supporting localized efforts at that kind of problem solving, but also supporting efforts that are going to open source. So at the moment, universities are within the neoliberal model of R&D, which is one of the big challenges. If R&D happens in a university, it's supposed to be commercialized. And this is one of the challenges that groups like AbilityMate, the 3D printing prosthetics group, have faced. They talk to a university and they go, well, we really need your research around prosthetics and let's do a partnership, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, but we kind of have to do this, this commercialization gig. So there's already been petitions by the librarians of Harvard that have said, if it's publicly funded research, it's public domain knowledge, right? So there's whole pushback against Elsevier and Taylor and Francis and all that mob. So so that's also part of that institutional rejigging that we need to do. The way that Christian Ioni talks about it, him and Sheila Foster have been really driving the urban commons ideas and theories, is that the enabling state expresses the role of the state, usually local public authorities, in facilitating the creation of urban commons and supporting collective governance arrangements for the management and sustainability of the urban commons. So the state not as a gatekeeper, not as a, you have to bow down to me and beg me for funds, but no, we are here to facilitate this shift to a new economy, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the last idea I'll just quickly end on is protocol cooperativism, another idea by Michel Bowen, so there's a lot I'm borrowing from him. So his essential argument is that cities are really strategic places to do this cosmo-localization thing. And so he's basically saying, why does one city have to create a whole circular economy software system, and then the other city has to do another one on their own? Cities should be mutualizing their cosmo-localization strategies across the planet. So if Seoul in Korea, South Korea, says, we're building a robust circular economy framework with software, everything, but we're also going to partner with all these other cities around the world so we can do that together. So protocol cooperativism is, how do you mutualize across cities? It's a form of global solidarity. We already see this a lot, with the C40 Alliance, that climate alliance. We've got cities with millions of people each. So it scales. You scale knowledge, skills, markets, finance, resources, infrastructure. So those are some of the kind of landscape stuff and some of the challenges. What to do? Well, there's lots of bits and pieces that we can do within this space. So thanks very much, and I think that's it for now. Okay. Great.